So let's look at building technology and materials. So again, dealing with this material side, but of course there are huge advances going on, so we have to address them because they're going to have an impact on you and on sort of the art and architecture of the period. One of the most important ones is going to be the development of stainless steel. Now, stainless steel is a steel where they add additional chromium into the stainless steel. This will react with oxygen, creating this protective layer over the surface. The advantage is it means that it does not rust. The entire idea of this surface is that it prevents any rusting. And if you were to scrape through it, it actually reproduces itself because there's more chromium in the steel to react with the oxygen in the air. So it creates a situation where it really doesn't rust. You can rust it, but it takes a little more effort. We're going to see this used in a lot of buildings because it opens the possibility that I can have a natural metal finish on an exterior project, such as the St. Louis Arch, which is, of course, famously stainless steel. And it stays bright. Yes, there are fingerprints and things if people touch it, but it's not going to oxidize and rust. Very unlike the Statue of Liberty, where that copper went from a copper color to the oxidized green that we're so used to today. We also see development of lightweight concrete. This is concrete where they add elements to it that will heat up, they will expand, and then as the concrete sets, they shrink, leaving a void. Now, today we use foaming concrete, which this is an example of foaming concrete, but it illustrates the point a little bit more. Basically, either way, you have concrete where I've incorporated voids or air pockets into it to create a more lightweight product, hopefully balancing that compression strength with being lightweight. Of course, too much air and it crumbles easily. Now, we will see this developed primarily for insulation, and it was in part developed due to this idea of Thomas Edison to create these very inexpensive concrete houses, which we see here, many of them in Detroit. There weren't a lot of them built, but there were some built. The idea was, let's throw up a mold, we can pour the concrete into it. It's going to be this lightweight concrete, so it's going to have an insulation element to it. The downside, of course, if you need to rewire or replumb something, well, you're digging through a concrete wall or mounting it outside of the wall, which is not terribly attractive. You have to lose some space to put up false walls in front of the concrete wall on the inside, very similar to drywall, so it loses some of its efficiency in terms of build time. But it also, lightweight concrete, allows for buildings where you have a lighter roof and lighter supports, which means I can use more glass. And that's going to be really important when we get to Bauhaus and international style down the line. We will see changes in city planning. This will start after World War I, but really hit its gear after World War II. And what we see is this urban sprawl, this spread into the suburbs. For example, in Madison, Sun Prairie used to be an independent place that took a little bit to get to. Now it's pretty much, well, the east side of Madison. In Milwaukee, same thing. Places like West Dallas, Wauwatosa, or Waukesha were all very independent of Milwaukee at one time, but that through sprawl has created a situation where it all comes together. Now, in terms of design, what this does is it means that you have these small, isolated homes, and people become more reliant on their home and their car because, of course, you don't have a neighborhood coffee shop. Look at this neighborhood. This is all residential. Where do I go if I just want to get out of the house? Well, you can't even get to the main road because it's set up in this very odd way that they do for subdivisions. So what is the issue here? Well, in terms of living, we go from an urban to a suburban environment. This urban environment, you would be living in an apartment. These are very efficient units because, of course, you can have a few hundred people or maybe a few thousand people living in the same building. The downstairs can be rented out, or that first floor, to businesses. And all I have to do is go down out to the street, and my local Starbucks is here, my local McDonald's is here, my local Target is here. Whatever it is that you're looking for, it's probably in walking distance in the neighborhood. I don't need a car. I don't need to worry about a lot of different ideas. Whereas when you move to the suburbs, what you have is an environment where I can't really walk anywhere safely because frequently there are no sidewalks. I can't get anywhere efficiently because everything's a curved line. It becomes very problematic in terms of city planning, and it changes, again, the way that we look at our society. Everything is jump in the car so that we can go down and get our cup of coffee, even if we're just coming back to the house. We also have to look at skyscrapers. Of course, during the first decades of the 20th century, skyscrapers are typically American, and even the first half of this period into the 1930s, they're seen as this primarily American development. Now, skyscrapers will, of course, start to appear elsewhere, but primarily after World War II. Now, in New York, competition during the 1920s and 30s to build the tallest skyscraper results in the Chrysler Building, which we're looking at in 1930, and the following year, the Empire State Building being built. And this raises this problem of what's called Vanity Height, which is the height above livable property in the building. So in other words, this is antennas being added, or as we see in some cases here, architectural elements where no one can actually live here. It doesn't serve a specific purpose. It's just there to make the tower taller, or the Burj Dubai, where we see the use of a giant antenna to do that. Now, most of these, especially after the war, will be built in glass and steel construction, which I'm going to get into a little bit later in this chapter. But that being said, glass and steel is not going to be something that we can build and use efficiently before the development of air conditioning, because of course you would create a giant greenhouse, even in places like New York and Chicago, not known for their heat. But in the summer, it wouldn't take that much to heat that building up to an intolerable level. Glass and steel also means more efficient building, cheaper building. So in other words, we can start chasing those heights that up until that point, no one had really been able to achieve.